So let's start with this injection point here. So this is on the lateral zygoma, but it's on the upper surface of that zygoma. Now look, if you look at the angle of this needle, the way I've placed it, it is slightly pointing upwards. That's because in my mind's eye, it is placed just here. And this surface, if you go at 90 degrees to it, is ever so slightly pointing upwards, which is great because that's what we want to do with cheeks. So lateral injection onto the periosteum, and you can palpate this with your needle. You can actually feel the curve of this, particularly when you're sliding off inferiorly. When you're at this angle, you can sense when it's a 90-degree angle, and you can feel when you're going off in the wrong plane. So little taps on the lateral surface of the lateral zygoma for a defining injection. Now there are other injections you can do more laterally if you need to later on, but these are the core injections we're covering today. The next injection point is the angle of the zygoma. So this is the greatest curvature of the bone. It's usually not the greatest curvature on the face because as we get older, the curve shifts down and medial. So you end up with a cheek where the greatest curvature is here. The remedy for it is to add volume here and here to counterbalance the excess volume medially. And this injection is key. So you would slide your needle down onto the periosteum after feeling the shape of the bone. So before you even do inject, I always recommend feeling anterior surface, lateral surface, and then with your fingers work your way up until you feel the apex. We can then choose an entry point that will allow your needle to land directly on the apex, which you can usually feel. And this is where you can inject a bolus that would give a beautifying injection. The next injection is the lateral lid cheek junctions. This is a powerful injection for restoration, but it has that risk of over-treatment. So here, we often want to use a thinner product, so you might use an intermediate grade thickness product. And I've also shifted my angle of injection slightly in recent years. I now prefer to go in with the bevel facing down, touch the periosteum and then inject because it's so easy for product to unfortunately come up to the surface, then you get left with a little bump or an irregularity. So this is a new tweak that I've made recently to try and reduce the risk of that happening, is to go in, bevel down into the same position, touching the periosteum, one injection and then mold it with your finger. The next entry point is this anterior injection. So this, I believe, does require a 90-degree angle of injection so that you are entering the anterior face. As soon as you enter from a different angle, you risk touching different parts of the periosteum and not projecting the cheek in the way that we want. So anterior cheek projection requires a 90-degree angle of injection. Straight down, touch the periosteum, and then a little bolus after aspirating, and you should see the cheek anteriorly project. Another really useful thing about this injection is sometimes when you can see the zygomatic ligament and it's depleted above the zygomatic ligament, you end up with a cheek shadow, which you can completely remedy with this injection. You must of course differentiate it from malar edema causing a shadow, which is the opposite way around. Finally, our last injection is this one here. As I said, I don't actually enter like this because I think we're in direct path of the transverse facial artery in some people. So this is an injection point where the bolus is underneath the area I showed you, but I usually enter like this and stay in the hypodermis, little depth check, aspirate, and then do a little bolus while molding the product up afterwards. So you end up with a rounded cheek, still with the high point defining the cheek here and here. If you're interested in learning much more about anatomy and the techniques that I use, make sure you sign up to my new movement. It's called Pro Injector. Click on the link. It's not open yet, but it will be soon.